So the idea to organise this joint event between the SYP and the ECPC came as we noticed kind of a lot of fear and uncertainty brought by a disrupted job market. When applying for publishing roles, a lot of people seem to think trade is the only option. And this is why we kind of wanted to open up another division of publishing, STM, which stands for Scientific, Technical and Medical, no one knows. And by giving you this kind of information, we hope that we can sort of enlarge your understanding of this industry and give you the opportunity for other sectors when you're applying for jobs. When you registered for this event, you had the opportunity to opt in or out to receive a one-off mentoring session with one of our lovely panellists, and we'll contact you shortly after this event and tell you whether or not you've been successful.
And in case you're not familiar with us at the SYP, so we represent everyone in the first 10 years of working in the publishing industry, as well as other related industries. We also represent anyone looking to get into the industry, so all at entry levels and all publishing hopefuls, which I know there's a lot at the moment joining us. We have committees in Oxford, London, the North, the Southwest, which is our new committee, Scotland and Ireland. We organise panels and social events to help members learn more about the industry and to meet other people in similar positions. At the SYP, we organise also mentorship schemes and a quarterly magazine in print for members. And here in Oxford, we also have a book club and a fortnightly podcast.
And just a little bit about the STM Association. It supports 140 members in their mission to advance research worldwide. Many different organisations such as academic and professional publishers, university presses, startups and established players work together to serve society by developing standards and technology to ensure research is of high quality, trustworthy and is easy to access. The Early Careers Publishers Committee is composed of publishers from STM member companies interested in promoting outreach and engagement with entry-level and experienced publishers. Some of the companies that make this up are Wiley, Taylor & Francis, Elsevier, Springer Nature, and the Future Science Group.
So now, the most important thing, I guess now, is to introduce our beautiful panelists. So we have Sara Bosshart, Open Access Publisher at International Water Association Publishing, Francesca Lake, Managing Editor at the Future Science Group, Jason Mitchell, Acquisition Editor, Serials and Handbooks at Elsevier, and last but certainly not least, we have Rachel Moriarty, Experienced Senior Editor at Springer Nature. So chairing this event today is Charlotte from Open Access Coordinator in the Open Research team. Was it right? Yeah, because I feel like you have a complicated job title. And so myself, so I'm a student liaison for SYP Oxford, and I'm also studying publishing at Oxford Brookes University. And now on to the first part of the panel, questions. So Charlotte, do you want to start with the first question?
Sure, yeah. So to kick off, we're going to ask each of the panelists to describe their career in STM publishing so far. So Fran, would you like to start?
Sure. So I started out doing a master's in biology at Nottingham, and I realised I hated labs. So that spurred my entry into publishing. I started as an assistant editor at Future Science Group, which is a small to medium-sized publisher in North London. We publish around 35 biomedical journals. So I started as an assistant editor, just managing peer review, finding expert peer reviewers, which was very boring. But I quickly moved up to be a commissioning editor, which meant I managed the content in a few oncology journals, which was really interesting. From there, I launched a few journals, which was a really fun experience. And they still exist, which is promising. And I launched our first open access journal, Future Science OA, which then spurred my move into our head of open access role, which I'm now in. I'm not a managing editor anymore, even though my profile on the website says so. So as head of open access, I ensure compliance, and I do a lot of project management, process integration, things like that, and I work on institutional agreements. I'm also still the editor of Future Science OA, so I still have a direct line with authors, which is something I really enjoy. And I'm also the editor-in-chief of Biotechniques, which is our behemoth of a journal, which also does news and interesting online content. So I get to work with that, which is really fun.
Great, thanks for that, Fran. Sarah, next. I'm just going clockwise around the screen.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so like Fran, I came from an academic background. I was midway through a PhD in marine geology before I decided that I did not want to stay in academia. And so I decided to finish with a master's and really had no idea what I wanted to do at that point. And that's where I got an internship at Frontiers, which is one of the largest open access publishers now. And I started out as an intern, as an editorial assistant, where I got experience launching new journals. And then when I got hired, I was very quickly promoted to a journal manager. At the time, Frontiers was quite a small startup, so it was growing rapidly, which was really exciting because we got to try all sorts of different things, from launching new journals to interacting with editors and really figuring out all of the publishing workflows from submission to publication and figuring out what we wanted to do with the ethics and everything. So it was really a wonderful crash course. So yeah, I spent a couple years managing journals and a team at Frontiers, and then I transitioned to where I am currently with the International Water Association. So we're a small society publisher, and we publish journals to do with water. And my role with IWA Publishing is to do with open access. And I was hired predominantly to come in and to figure out how we can transition our portfolio of journals, which are traditionally subscription journals, and basically how to make them open access. And so it was a lot of fun. I got to create my role and figure out what we needed to do. A lot of that involves launching new open access journals, trying to figure out how to transition old journals into open access. I get to talk about open access at conferences, a lot of travel. So yeah, I really enjoy that aspect of my job.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Sarah. Jason, how about you?
Yep, so I started by doing a master's course at Stirling University, which for me really gave me a thorough understanding of all the different departments within publishing and the end-to-end process. So it, in a way, it kind of opened up a lot of doors for me, because I started off in sales as an academic rep for Palgrave Macmillan, and moved over to production. And then I moved over to editorial. So, you know, I've kind of worked in, it can be seen as quite unusual in some ways, you know, certain people kind of focus their career in one particular area. So yeah, I've worked at Town Francis and joined Elsevier 12 years ago, and I've worked in 3 or 4 different departments since then. I currently work as an acquisitions editor in serials, where I deal with handbooks and serials that publish. So we've got a program of 75 serials, and I've got a portfolio of chemistry, physics, and economics.
That's great. And Rachel?
So I wanted to be a writer. I was absolutely determined. So my undergraduate was film and English with a side of creative writing. And then I realized I couldn't take the criticism. So I moved into publishing as a filler. So like Jason, I did a publishing master's, and Jason and I have this wonderful rivalry about who did the best publishing master's, and obviously mine. But then I started off again, as most people do in publishing, as a kind of editorial assistant, that kind of level. And I haven't left. I'm still with the same company, kind of 11 years later. And I have a portfolio of about 20 computer science journals, focusing on the kind of human-computer interaction, AI, and that kind of side of things. And I know this wonderful group because we're all in the early career committee together, of which I'm chair, and Fran's taking over as chair after me.
Brilliant. So I think if we move to the second question, do you need a background in research to be successful in STM? And I want to start with Francesca, because you have graduated with a master's with science and biology. So if you can just answer that one.
Yeah, so a lot of people do think you need a PhD if you're going to have a research background to get into publishing. And some publishers do require that, but some don't. So I would say that's definitely not something that should put people off. If they've only done a master's, you can get in like me. Or even an undergraduate. So where I work, we actually hire bachelors.
Okay. Anyone else has anything on that matter?
Yeah, I can just add, I mean, similarly, I came from an academic background, but I am the only one at my publishing house that has a science background. Most of my colleagues studied literature, history, and some did publishing masters, but actually a lot of them came straight out of their undergraduate degrees. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think depends on the publisher. And I think what we found at Springer is either brings positives. So if you come from an academic background, you have a way of interacting maybe with the content and the editors-in-chief perhaps, and on a way that you wouldn't, for example, coming from a publishing master's, but then from a publishing master, you have an understanding of kind of all aspects of publishing, perhaps that someone from an academic background wouldn't. So I think it's, and you learn the skills for either job on the job, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. You don't specifically need to have that background. But what I would say is, you know, researchers are our customers, and it would offer you a real good insight and understanding to their particular needs when you're doing the job. But you know, I think it's best to avoid too much of a specialism in certain respects. And you know, as your career and your job progresses, I think other skills and different experiences and different backgrounds kind of come into play.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, so with that in mind, what would you say are the best resources, channels, or job boards to follow in STM publishing?
Oh, there's loads.
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to start? There's a lot to say.
I'd say Scholarly Kitchen is a great place to just learn about the industry. It's all opinion, it's not news, but so obviously it's opinion, so bear that in mind, but it provides a really interesting insight to what's going on in the industry, and it's generally quite good at explaining things. So if you are new, you don't get stuck on technical jargon.
Totally agree. And job wise, I think in terms of looking for jobs, there are a couple of agencies. So I think like Inspired Selection, Atwood Tate, they can be quite good for when you're actually looking for the jobs themselves. Obviously Bookseller as well. So
yeah, I definitely recommend the Bookseller. I think it's got a really good grounding in all areas of publishing. Also Association of Learned and Professional Publishing, they've got a really good website as well with some really good reports, and their careers pages are really useful as well.
Yeah, and I would add as well social media, surprisingly. So when I was looking for a job, I actually found the internship at Frontiers through Twitter, of all things. So, you know, publishing hashtags, STM publishing, all that sort of thing. And also, I mean, if you have a sense of what publishers you might be interested, you can always look on their websites as well. They'll post the jobs on there too. So if you know you're looking for a society publisher, a big publisher, and which one, you can, you know, keep an eye on their boards as well.
Okay, so would you say that people could just contact publishers, even if they don't advertise for jobs, just to see if they can fit in somewhere?
I would say yes. I mean, certainly if I get that kind of email, which I have from time to time, I'm always impressed with the initiative of that person. So I would say, yeah, well-phrased, informational sort of interview question. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And on that note again, so what kind of entry-level roles should publishing hopefuls turn to when they want to start their career in STM publishing? If you want to start, I don't know, if someone has something to say first, or I go round.
I'm going to note first that all publishers call their entry-level roles a different thing. So
Okay, so enlighten us.
Sorry, what?
Just guide us through the different things that publishing hopefuls can encounter when they job search.
So I think I think most people coming into publishing at the entry level are going to be getting the entry level position. So in editorial, it'd be your editorial assistant type role, production assistant. I think what can be really helpful if you're looking not just for kind of job titles, but what are the jobs within publishing? Because all you normally hear is editorial assistant, production assistant, but I think we forget that there are hundreds of other departments within publishing. It's a huge ecosystem. So you have sales, HR, IT, user experience. And one thing is, it's silly, but it's something that I find really useful. I want to say it's Ken Anderson's article in the Scholarly Kitchen was, I think, and if I'm attributing this wrong, I apologize, but it's all the things that publishers do. I think he's got like a list of 100 odd activities that publishers offer for added value. And I thought that was really useful because within every single one of those added value is a job role. So you learn about the abstracting and indexing, you learned about all the kind of the archiving. So I think there's so many entry-level jobs, so don't just kind of focus on the production, editorial, and I think you can find lots of other different places to kind of make your way in.
Anyone else?
Yeah, and this is, so we and a few other publishers, it's quite new, offer an apprenticeship program as well. So for anyone who hasn't gone through the university track, do look at some of the apprenticeship opportunities in publishing. It's a great way to sort of get to know the different departments. So our apprentice, for instance, is trying some production, some editorial, some marketing, some sales. So it's a great way to get to know various areas as well.
I would say, you know, the beauty of the SYP and the STM association is that they have their own mentoring schemes. So, you know, if you're looking to get a real good understanding in what skills are required within specific roles, then, you know, do take advantage of those schemes and getting hooked up with somebody, you know, and finding out more from somebody who's been there and is doing the job.
Would you be able, for example, if someone was interested in STM, of them messaging you on your social media to just learn more and have him, you talk about your job?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think on our career pages, we have interviews with people within their roles as well. And that's something that we're adding to all the time. So we have interviews with, I think we try to be as diverse as possible in terms of job role. So I think there's definitely some day in the life almost from a lot of these people.
Great, thank you.
So recently, we've seen a massively increased awareness of the need for more diversity and inclusivity in publishing. So how is STM Publishing welcoming this change?
I would say briefly, within Elsevier, certainly, they're taking this very seriously. So the Elsevier board has got recruited somebody into place whose purpose is specifically around the area of diversity, you know, to make sure it's properly embedded within the company. Within the structure of the departments, I'm certainly aware when we're, you know, recruiting authors, recruiting editors, have diversity in mind, and it's, you know, it's something that's being discussed on a daily basis within the industry. You know, looking at editorial boards and the makeup of editorial boards, you know, in the past they've been very white male dominated to some extent, and this is changing every day now, so, and being addressed.
Rachel, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, so I think I'm echoing Jason. I think I can speak on most of the kind of big publishers, and actually all publishers are actively looking at how to be more diverse and inclusive. We cannot operate in the world we live in without doing so. It's not okay anymore. It's not okay to turn a blind eye to the inequalities that are happening everywhere. So I think as an industry, we are moving towards being more diverse and inclusive, and the response to Black Lives Matter was, on the whole, really, I hope, positive for the field. But I also think within most companies we do have like forums, and as Jason says, we have usually directors of integrity and diversity. But I also think a lot of industry events are trying to be more inclusive in their panels and the topics they're covering. And I also think there's some other wider things like Research for Life, which is looking at kind of giving access to, I think it's United Nations least developed countries, giving them free access to content. So that's a way that there's actual proactive initiatives taking place. So that would be kind of my input.
Yeah, there's new resources available from places like the RSC and the Coalition for Diversity and Inclusion that are really that provide really helpful frameworks for helping with this kind of thing. So those are good to see.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think everyone covered most of what I would have said. I think, yeah, same with us. You know, we just try to make sure our boards and everything are as inclusive and diverse as possible. And actually, the apprentice scheme was something that we wanted to participate in as well, to make sure that people from different backgrounds have access to publishing. And so, yeah, I would agree. I think it's something that everyone's talking about at every meeting now. So it's really at the forefront of what we're thinking about.
Yeah, that's great. So in addition to that being at the forefront of what everyone's talking about now, what are some of the other sort of trends that have come up in STM recently that you've noticed?
I'd say there's an increased reliance on technology now. So there's new startups you hear about all the time that are providing some kind of interesting thing that a publisher might want to use, like metrics and dimensions. So for anyone coming into the industry, I'd recommend having a look at like the kind of tech places that are around and making sure you understand like what metadata is, or an API, which are all really dry topics, but they're very useful for someone coming into publishing to have an awareness of.
Artificial intelligence in there as well. Like I'm finding AI has become more kind of prevalent in the things we're doing. And with the kind of on the diversity and inclusivity topic, looking at the ethics of using those AI kind of things as well, which I think publishers are going to have to at some point grapple with too.
Yeah, and I think transparency and sort of trust in the publishers in terms of peer review workflows, in terms of, yeah, I mean, that it all ties into open access as well, but open data and open citations, all of these things trying to break open what historically was all kind of hidden, is also things we're talking about a lot.
Yeah, for me, I was kind of thinking along the lines of following on from the diversity discussion. So the gender pay gap has been a huge issue, and that's something that I've seen a lot of discussion about within the company and outside, and efforts to address that and really, you know, make pay far more transparent and fair.
Okay, so because we have quite a lot of publishing hopefuls with us tonight, would you be able to tell us what are the different business models in STM publishing and how do they work? Who wants to start?
I'm happy to take a stab at it.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, so there's several. I'd say, you know, the traditional one is your sort of subscription model, right, where libraries and institutions would subscribe to a journal and then get access to it. Now with the general industry push towards open access, we're seeing a lot of models that are somewhere between either the traditional subscription but open access. So you have now these read and publish type models where you incorporate both the access to the content but also the publishing components. So being able to publish work open access, to sort of more pure open access models such as ECPC models where the author would pay to publish and then the content is completely free for everyone. And now other models are emerging such as subscribe to open, where the idea is that you're moving money away from the subscribers paying for access, but actually the library is then paying for open access to the content. So you have sort of, yeah, models now that are along this continuum, and publishers are having to evaluate, you know, what works for them, what will maintain their revenue flows sort of over the next couple of years as they transition more towards open access. So those are the main ones I can think of at the moment.
Francesca, do you have anything to add?
I think that covers it quite nicely. There's about 5 different colours of open access now, like you've got gold and green and platinum. So it's very complicated, but I think Sara covered it nice and succinctly, so I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, anyone else has something to say before we move on to the next question?
I would just say that we have a lot of kind of acronyms and kind of, yeah, like Fran was saying, lots of different colors. And so things like when Sara said APC, that would be article processing charge and these sort of things. So what I would say is if you are coming into the industry knowing that you have subscription, which is behind a paywall that you have to, you know, as Sarah says, like libraries, people pay to access the content. Then you have something that is fully open, and then there's different ways you either pay for that, or it's free, or it's you archive it yourself. And then there's someone in the middle, which has half and half. And I think that that would probably be enough to get you in until you're then immersed in it, and then it'll come probably more naturally. I was just aware that when I started, open access was really taking off, and that was one thing I came into the job knowing what open access was, and that actually put me a bit at the forefront in my company. So I would definitely say with the move that we're going, as kind of Sarah and Fran, they both work for open access publishers, you know, we're all behind open access. So that would be something that if you are interested in doing, probably worth just taking a wee kind of half an hour or so just to educate yourself, and then these terms will become more familiar.
Any good resources to like have an understanding of these acronyms and all these vocabulary? Or is it just Googling and just figuring out?
I'm sure I've seen something on Scholarly Kitchen again.
Yeah, it's always the best. I would always go Scholarly Kitchen straight away. They do layman really well. So if you don't know a single thing, I learn a lot. If I'm going to a meeting about a certain topic, I will check Scholarly Kitchen first to make sure I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's actually quite a lot of great infographics out there too. So actually, if you just Google open access and you go to images, quite a few nice infographics on whatever you might be interested in might come up too. So.
Okay. Charlotte, next question.
Yeah, sure. So obviously we've been discussing open access and how the industry is kind of leaning towards that, and I think hoping to transition towards that more in the future. But I was just wondering if you could give a little bit of an insight into, because it's quite a heavily debated topic, open access. I wondered if, particularly Sarah and Fran, if you'd be able to give us an insight into what the debates around open access kind of are, briefly. If you...
Yeah, Fran, do you want to start, or you?
Yeah, I can start, I suppose. So open access isn't ideal. Everyone wants to get to that point. I think everyone who's been to uni or anything has really valued being able to freely access research and preferably the data behind it. The publishing industry has been slow transitioning to open access very slowly. And I don't currently see where that would actually happen if we're not pushed to do it, which is why people like panellists have cropped up who are trying to kind of make it come along. However, the publishing ecosystem is so complicated that moving to a fully open access world quickly is really hard. So authors have grants from a funder who may require them to publish open access, and if they do, that funder may give the author the money to pay for the open access, which is fine. But if the funders don't provide the money to the researchers won't have the money to pay for that, and we still need to pay our staff. So that's only 3 of the stakeholders. There's loads. So I think open access will happen eventually, but I think it needs kind of global buy-in in order to get to the end point, because publishers want to do it. It's just left on our own, we can't really get there.
Yeah, I completely agree with Fran, and I'd say that it was more contentious, you know, sort of 3-4 years ago, but we've reached the point in the industry where I think most publishers recognize that open access is the future, and it's less how can we avoid open access and more how can we make this happen in a way that we as a company can remain sustainable. And that question, as Fran was saying, it's different for every publisher. For the author pay model, there's really incentive for a publisher to publish large volumes because your money is coming in per article. For smaller publishers like society publishers, where we have a very small number of publications, but actually quite a large traditional subscription revenue, it's not very simple to switch to that particular model. And so a lot of publishers are having to look at other ways that they can move towards open access. And that's really where it takes time. But the ideal is really, in my opinion, to move that money that was coming from the libraries before and basically make that the money that's eventually paying for open access, because the money's there. We just need to slowly transition it to where it's paying for open access, but it's tricky, and basically we need to all work together to figure out the best way to do that.
Yeah. Another example of why it's so hard is a university may be paying a certain subscription fee, but they publish loads of articles, whereas another university may pay the same subscription fee at the moment, but they barely pay anything. If we flip to an article processing charge model where the author pays, the first university is then paying so much more, and they've already got library budgeting issues. So it feeds down into everybody, and it really needs us all to all work together.
And there's other kind of issues within that as well. It's not just about the money. You have some journals that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. They have really good impact factors. They have incredible reputations. But if that's a subscription journal and the funders are saying, well, actually, we want you to publish in an open access journal only, that then means the author choice is more limited. And I think that's part of the debate, is preserving author choice, but also still wanting to move to an open access future. So there's, and the other thing is, if you have, and this is not just unique to open access journals, but if you have a smaller journal of, say, 20, 30 articles a year, it's harder to get the indexing and the metrics that then bring you in. And so some new journals tend to be open access, but then they're competing in a very heavy competition field. So then getting their articles themselves to grow, and then to grow enough to be kind of indexable. So it's really quite snarly, all of it. But that's not an excuse not to push for it. So I think that's what the publishing industry is realizing, is that we aim to serve a need, and that need is clearly towards moving to an open access future. So that should be where our focuses are, regardless of the kind of the problems that are in the way. It's just trying to find a way that, as kind of Fran and Sarah were saying, we remain sustainable ourselves as kind of companies.
I think for my particular area of the business, it's a very small sort of topic of discussion at the moment, but I, like the rest of the panelists are saying, I can see this eventually moving to become, far more of a demand. And as you were saying, Rachel, just about indexing, that is something that, yeah, we're having to address quite to quite a large extent, with people wanting this outside of open access situations. So the good thing is with some of the larger publishers, perhaps, is that we're able to offer technology that can meet these different needs, and that obviously that discussion is ongoing with customers. So yeah.
Okay, so moving on from open access for a minute, what skills would you say are desirable for a career in STM, and what should we be focusing on more?
So for me, where I am, we generally hire graduates fresh out of uni. So I look for soft skills as opposed to experience. Time management and organisation is really important to working in publishing. I'm pretty sure in every role that you find in publishing, you're always going to have some kind of deadline to meet. Being proactive is something that I think is important, and having the ability to communicate clearly, because you're going to be speaking with your colleagues, and if you're in an editorial role like me, you're going to spend a huge amount of time speaking to authors. And demonstrating an interest in the industry is a must. So if you do apply to a publishing role and you do mention that open access is a thing that you've read about, then great.
Yeah, I would say, to really shine, as Fran said, communication skills are really important in various, different situations, from going out to meet editorial boards to motivate them, get them to do what you need them to do, get them on board of what you're trying to achieve. I also think emotional intelligence has become very important. Obviously it's difficult to measure, but having a good understanding of why people react the way they do, and changing procedures accordingly. I think also for myself, problem solving is a major area that you can apply to every single role in publishing that you're going to encounter. So, you know, familiarizing yourself, different problem solving techniques, you know, stand you in good stead.
Sarah, I see a lot of nodding.
Yeah, no, I mean, all of those are great. And I guess I would just add that for a lot of roles, just to be interested in learning potentially new fields. So, I mean, if you're coming from a non-academic background into an STM field, just to have an interest in learning whatever area you end up working in the different journals. So, I mean, for instance, I started out as a marine geologist and I started working on marine related journals, but now our focus is entirely to do with water. And every time you sort of transition from a different field, you're going to have to learn about that particular field. So just a broad interest in yeah, and open-mindedness, I guess, as well, in terms of what you might end up being responsible for. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the things as well, and it follows on a little bit from what Jason was saying, is I would also say maybe negotiation and conflict resolution. I find a lot in my role that we end up having to not write contracts, but we usually have to negotiate the terms directly, say with editors-in-chief or societies. And also there's an amazing book that I use, is How to Have Impossible Conversations, because sometimes you're going to be at polar opposites to the person you're dealing with, and finding the common ground without giving away your own integrity and without impinging the integrity of the person you're working with. I think that is kind of really important. So feeling kind of comfortable in having those conversations, but that is a skill that will also come with practice. You know, I presented at a conference and it was the worst experience of my life. It was my first year in publishing. It went really badly, but boy, did I learn, you know, how to kind of deal with really difficult conversations, funnily enough, about open access. So you're also your presentation skills, because you probably will have to do some sort of presentation, either whether it's just internally or to external partners. And the last thing I would say is I never expected to work as much with Excel as I do. So there is a lot of different reasons to use Excel or Sheets or an equivalent. So having some sort of comfortableness with Excel is beneficial, and YouTube saves me. So like Sarah was saying about trying to educate yourself on topic areas, you know, YouTube is fantastic for kind of crash courses and things, but I also find it really useful for, you know, how to do funny things with Excel and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I would say those couple of things.
Also, I would only just add sort of collaboration and teamwork is really important. I think what I've experienced a lot of in the last 4 to 5 years is kind of cross-team, cross-department situations, scenarios, you know, to address a certain sort of business need, and they're quickly put together, and you know, you achieve what you're trying to do with all these different people from different backgrounds in the company, and then it's quickly disbanded again. So that does happen a lot in Elsevier.
Anything else? So I'll just direct the question a bit more. So how can someone demonstrate their knowledge of open access in their cover letter if they want to impress or just to show their enthusiasm when they apply for a job? Who can answer this one?
I think if you know the journals you're working on, mentioning whether they are the open access, the subscription, or the hybrid, which is in the middle, is an easy way to do that.
Yeah, I think it would depend a little bit on the role you were going for to tie in, you know, the open access in there. But I mean, if just demonstrating that you're aware that sort of the industry is going in that direction. If you want to be really impressive, you could maybe mention something about Plan S or yeah, some of those large plans in the works. But I think just having a general knowledge of that's sort of the future.
So even if it's quite opinionated, this topic, do you think people should just go for it and be honest, or just try to match the company's like values?
You are never going to get on with a company if you don't share their values, because you're going to be their spokesperson. So, you know, I think if you're wanting to work for a subscription publisher and you are 100% away and think subscription is the worst thing ever, you're going to be having to sell the subscription model. So if you're cool with that, I wanted to go into fiction. When I finished my master's, I wanted to go into fiction, but there was no money in fiction, so I followed the money into STM. So there's some things that you can be quite happily, but I think if it goes against your value system, don't. It's not worth it. You will never be happy at that job.
I would say always be honest. I think, just use your initiative, innovate, and try and find out different things, and apply yourself in different ways, in order to get on the career ladder. But you'll save yourself a lot of pain in the long run, by, like Rachel was saying, just being true to that particular business and you're fit for that business.
Looking at their About Us section can be quite helpful with the company you're looking at. So and also some companies do press releases, so you can maybe have a look at what are the things they are focusing on sharing with the community. So things like sustainable development goals, that's another actual trend in the industry I think that we didn't quite mention about, how can we work with sustainability, climate change, all of these things. So if you look at what are these things that the publisher is choosing to focus on, and if you can tie in your interest with those things, I think adding that into your cover letter, or even tying that into your CV if you've done a project that's on something that kind of would speak to the publisher, that can be how you get past the kind of first round.
I think also reading annual reports is a bit of a sad hobby of mine. Was read annual reports of different companies, competitors, the keywords that keep popping up and being used. You get a real sense of the direction that company's heading in and what it's really interested in.
Okay, that's very interesting. So I guess now we'll open the second part of our panel to a Q&A. We have a few already, so I'll just press on with the first question if it's okay for everyone. So someone said, I'm looking to get into STM publishing. Can you suggest anything, like any online courses, ideas for upskilling in this difficult time to break into the industry? So someone was talking about YouTube. So can you expand on that?
I think that was me.
Okay.
But I think any sort of kind of YouTube search that does it on, YouTube's a funny thing. You can have, I can be put off watching a YouTube video just by the tone of someone's voice. So I think sometimes you can find certain channels with playlists, for example. I think my husband got me onto one recently, and I can't remember what it was for the life of me, but it was 30-minute crash courses. So I have a new journal on artificial intelligence, for example, and while I think I'm pretty savvy, I don't think I'm savvy enough to be having the conversations that I'm having. So I'm currently doing a 30-minute crash course on artificial intelligence. And like I said, you could do the same with Excel. And can my panelists correct me? People can access the ALPS training courses if you're not a publisher, right?
I think so. I was just thinking about those as well, but I think you can.
So one thing we probably might need to kind of check, I know if someone can quickly Google it while we're talking, but ALPS is actually where I met Fran. So Fran and I met on a kind of altmetrics training course. And I think if you're able to, and these are usually half-day, one-day courses, focusing on key training within the kind of publishing industry. It can be on ethics, it can be on research integrity, it can be on metrics, it can be on lots of different things. So I think that might be, if they're accessible to kind of people who are not affiliated with a particular publisher, that would be some of our first publishing specific courses.
Okay, any other resources to share, wisdom to share?
I mean, I take LinkedIn courses sometimes, but for that you also have to pay for a LinkedIn course subscription. But there's really a lot of great things on there to learn about different things.
Okay.
There's also some on Google, I believe. I know someone who did one on coding that I think was free, which can be useful to some roles.
Yeah, I think coding probably is the one that's coming up more and more, is being able to code. And there's definitely, I think MIT might have free courses as well. So if you're moving into kind of the more computer sciencey side of publishing, if that's your program, I think MIT definitely do some courses that are free. But yeah, a Google search can be really helpful sometimes in just finding. But again, I think most entry-level roles are not going to be expecting you to come with a fully fledged publishing kind of skill kit. So as Fran said before, the soft skills are what we're looking for. So again, if you're worried about your public speaking or your presentation skills, that might be something that you would look into. And again, there are loads of free stuff kind of on the internet about kind of how to improve your, and the Impossible Arguments book I was mentioning, there's other stuff online about what are the different kind of argument techniques. And I found that really useful about things like red herrings and how do you if someone is having a conversation with you and they're arguing, how can you deal with their arguments if they're misdirecting or all these things. I think was again a soft skill that I think was really important, and again, free on the internet.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't really add anything to those. I think they're all really good ideas. I think I'm quite a fan of good old fashioned, just making contact with someone, set up a call with them, ask them what they do, why they do it, and how they go about doing it, and that would stand them in good stead as well.
Okay, so we have a few questions that came in. Charlotte, do you want to pick the one that sounds the most interesting?
I like this one is, what has been the most interesting project you've worked on during your career? Add some spice into this.
Yes, a bit.
For me, if I could just jump in, this is because it's brand new for me. I've just launched a journal on AI and ethics, and it is super exciting because you're dealing not just with academia for a change, you're dealing with industry, the public, law, policy, and all of these things. So every now and again, you will get the opportunity within your career to work on a project that not only ties in what you're working to in your job, but also in your personal life. So I'm an absolute sci-fi fantasy buff. So I've spent my life kind of dealing with Skynet and all these kind of things. So actually working on a journal that's actually dealing with the real world issues is super exciting. So again, I think if you find a publisher that publishes content similar to your personal interests, that can be a really exciting opportunity to work on projects internally, which are good fun.
Okay, okay, I'm just looking at the questions. What's the biggest draw to STM publishing for you?
I think for me, it's knowing that the content is going to benefit, mankind, really. It's really important, medicine, health, all those kind of areas, just really important to society. And I think that's, being able to contribute to that in some small ways, really fulfilling for me.
Yeah, I for me, predominantly working in open access, I fundamentally believe that everyone should have access to research. And so some of the most exciting aspects of my job are talking to people who had really limited access to research through universities where they just don't have the money for subscriptions, and they're so passionate about being able to access content through open access. And especially so our society is quite global. We've got authors in Africa, in India, and a lot in Southeast Asia, and so we have conferences all over the world, and speaking to people there who are able to now access a lot of the content that we made open access, including books. It's really exciting, and to see how that's helped them to do their research.
Charlotte, do you want to go?
Sure. There's
Fran, do you have something to say?
No, I was just going to say I agree with both Sarah and Jason. Those are the two things that are my biggest draws. So.
Okay, good.
Another question that's come up is, what would be your advice for those of us looking to progress in the industry?
Volunteer for everything. I've found internally, you sometimes get the opportunity to join things like working groups who are looking at specific things internally. I would say absolutely join as many as you can. Because that will not only give you insights into what's going on in the industry, but also what's important to your company, but also to network with people within the company who you might never meet otherwise. Because you won't believe how those relationships will benefit you later on. Being able to know people in different departments, also giving you different perspectives, and that's really good for the problem solving that Jason was mentioning. So yeah, volunteer for everything and step forward for things like early career committee if your company is interested, if you're on the STM, or joining SYP, or joining all of the many kind of early career publishing kind of networks that are around, because that will also introduce you to people outside of your business, which can be really important for widening your kind of perspective.
Yeah, I think sort of adding on to that, there's a lot of industry events too. And okay, now most of them are virtual, but pre-COVID times, they were great ways to meet them. There's a lot of actually open access events too, just talking about the direction the industry is taking with OA. So those are a great way to network and meet people. Mentoring schemes as well. So the STM, we have a mentoring scheme. It's a great way to be paired with someone at a different company and, you know, get to know about that company. But all of those connections you can make, I think that it's, you know, the more people you know, the more likely someone else will be there to advocate for you as you're thinking about that new role, and also be able to advise you, you know, what might be the best fit for you. So, yeah.
I would say be familiar with the skill sets and competencies that are required in the roles that you're really interested in and progressing and working towards, and, you know, really make a plan of action to go out and get them under your belt. And also just be really brutally honest with where you are at the moment, and, you know, which areas you might need to address, and yeah, hopefully get your manager on board with addressing those.
Okay, so I think we've answered to one of the questions. So what extra challenges are there in open access books, and what have publishers done to try and prepare, for example, Planet S, even though its deadline is longer for books?
Yeah, so books, they are their own challenge, but at least for us, so for STM, we found that there is still quite a bit of funding available for open access books. Certainly different countries have funds for that. We as a publisher have partnered with Knowledge Unlatched, which is sort of a crowdfunding. Basically, they go around to libraries, you submit a package of books, and they try to get money from each of the libraries to make that whole package open access. And that's been really successful for us. So we've made, 20 books this year open access through that. So there's a lot of these kinds of initiatives out there. It's just a question of sort of looking for them and making researchers aware that those kinds of programs are available, and to speak to their publisher if they're interested in making their book open access. We certainly will go out of our way to help an author make their book open access if that's something they're interested in.
Okay, moving on. Charlotte, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So what is the place of licensing in STM, and how does it work?
Is this in terms of like copyright licensing?
I think so.
Oh, that's a wonderful world. Most publishers offer various licenses to open access authors, generally depending on what they need. There's a range of licenses that come from CC. They range from being really open. So all someone would need to do if they wanted to reuse the work was attribute the original. And that's generally the most popular for authors. But it also ranges to the most closed, which prevents you from using something for a commercial purpose or for making derivatives, which publishers tend to prefer because it allows them to protect the work a bit more. It's quite formulaic, though. I think most publishers use the same licenses as each other, so it's very, like, everyone knows what they mean now, which is good. And it's a lot of acronyms again, as we said earlier. So.
Anyone else, or can I move on to one of the last questions?
I will say there's still a little bit of siloing, I think, within publishers as well. So I work on journals and I couldn't tell you a single thing about licensing. So I could put you who to go in touch with, but apart from what Fran said about the kind of open access licensing and knowing that we license for translations and that we do other kind of licenses when it comes to government employees and that sort of thing. But unless you're working kind of really closely with it, I've found that not working closely with it, that I don't know very much, and that's kind of full disclosure.
You have to go on Scholarly Kitchen. Your answers with it. Yeah. Okay. I think one of the last question. What is the most popular format in STM publishing, and is there like a huge place of ebooks and audiobooks, for example?
We're moving into an e-future. I think print is definitely either on the way out or is already out. I think it's not very common to get kind of print subscriptions to journals, for example, anymore. I think it's different in books. I think there's definitely still a desire to have, especially for the authors, to have the kind of print copy on their shelves and things like that. But I would definitely say we're moving very much to ebooks and online. Kind of a lot of most open access journals, as far as I'm aware, are online only. We don't do print for kind of open access journals. As for audiobooks, no idea. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, for a lot of STM, certainly our books, they're very technical, and it's not really a format that would translate very well into an audiobook. I think, yeah, you need to be able to see a lot of the formula to be able to understand a lot of the STM text. So I think that not yet. I think you'd have to have a companion to your audiobook if you were to go that way. But I definitely agree, mostly digital nowadays. Although certainly with our books, we find that even if we made a book open access, so there's an e-copy online that's available for free, we will still sell the print copy as well. So there is still demand, certainly, for print in books.
Anyone else?
I think for me, again, we've mostly moved to online only. We do print one of our open access journals, but that has always printed, and it has a lot of advertising revenue, which supports it. Instead of audio books, we've kind of turned to a podcast kind of idea now for some of our content, which is really helping to explain some of our research articles that are in the journal. Again, I agree with Sarah that most journal articles, which is what I work on, would need the visual, so you can see images and things, but the podcasts are really helpful and popular.
It's surprising. Like I wouldn't expect podcasts to work for STM, but why not?
Surprising what some people find interesting.
Yeah, I would say podcasts are becoming more important now. And just generally, just being aware of the digital first workflow is the most important thing. Prints for us is, print on demand and fulfilling orders as and when they come in, rather than the traditional way, which was having a warehouse full of stock. Those days are long gone, basically.
Okay.
Just hopefully as the industry moves towards more diversity and inclusivity, we'll find a way to make journal articles more accessible. But it's a tricky one, isn't it? I don't know how that would happen in the future.
That is definitely something that, I was thinking that myself with the question. I was thinking, is our content fully accessible? And that's the question for higher up heads than mine. But I think that's a fair point to acknowledge, actually, yeah.
I think it's a good point to end our conversation, I think, just to show all the opportunities that are still yet to happen. So everyone who is still willing to join STM, you have your say and you can contribute to that, all these innovations. So please don't put STM on the side and just apply to jobs, because people are so friendly. You've seen with our wonderful panel today, people are friendly. Just talk to them if you need to learn more about the industry, and if you just want just to get in there.